Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Today we are going to talk about the use of quotas in science. Is that the right way, the right measure to promote women, to close the gender gap in science? Last week, Dr. Christian Levet told us that women make up 60% of the university first-year students at the University of Zurich, but only 25% of the professor overall. To introduce the topic, I have the pleasure to give the floor to Didier Picard, member of the organizing committee of this webinar series.
Yes, thank you very much, Romaine. Welcome to everyone. I am the president of a professional society called Life Sciences Switzerland. And as such, I have participated in this SNAT work group to put together this webinar series. We realized, of course, that research funding policies and appointment and promotion of professors can be affected by gender biases. Regarding funding, large-scale studies, notably of the NIH and the DFG, have led to controversial or even contradictory findings. Nevertheless, many funding bodies and institutions have put in place policies against such biases, but are still struggling to implement them, either with coercive or incentive measures, or a mix of both. Although gender quota is almost a dirty word, notably in Switzerland, we were curious to hear from funding agencies and academia why quota might be a useful tool, to what extent they have been tested, and whether they worked. And therefore, it's a great pleasure to welcome the first speaker today, Simona Isler. She's from the Gender Equality Office of the Swiss National Science Foundation, and she will tell us about the Swiss National Science Foundation gender equality policy and the recent rather radical adoption of gender quotas in its own decision bodies. And then we'll have Gerline Ballon, who is the Deputy Director of the European Molecular Biology Organization, EMBO. She has authored peer-reviewed studies on the selection processes and the effect of gender on application success at EMBO. Most importantly for our discussion today, she has co-authored an in-depth report by EMBO on the use of quota in academia across Europe. And with this, I give back to Romain.
Thank you, Didier Picard, for this welcome note. Using gender quotas in academia, what are the arguments for, what are the arguments against? Our speaker today, Dr. Simona Isler, Gerline Ballon. As usual, you can ask your question with this Q&A application on your screen. Dr. Simona Isler, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I will just share my slides before I start. No, I have to. Now it's fine, correct?
Yeah, it's fine. We have the slide on screen.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitations. Yes, I would like to tell you the story of quotas at the National Research Council and evaluation panels of the Swiss National Science Foundation. As you already know, as it was mentioned in the introduction, we at this SNSF introduced quota in our own bodies from the beginning of this year. So how did this start? It started with the situation that we in our own bodies don't have an equal share of male and female members, and that we decided that we should lead also, not only, but also by example, and that we really wanted to start at our own, at home, and do a better job regarding gender equality in our own bodies. So what you see now is the current situation at the SNSF. It has improved since the beginning of the year, I must say. This is the situation right now. You see first in the evaluation panels, we have 36% of women, all over panels. I have to say that the situation is very, very diverse. There are some panels, also depending on disciplines, where the share is equal, or even some disciplines where we have more women than men. But we also still have panels where there are almost no women, or just one woman, for example, which is a situation we think is no more acceptable. And then if you have a look at the Research Council, which is, of course, our body that does not only evaluate projects and applications, but also take political research funding, political decisions regarding the organization of research funding. We have quite a good share of women with 42%. Then I put also the numbers for each division. So each disciplinary field as we are organized, you see SSH, you see STEM, and you see life sciences, and our division programs. And then our presiding board, we have at the moment a share of women of about 38%. What is also important to see is that this situation at the Swiss National Science Foundation, so the share of female members in our bodies, reflects the situation in Switzerland. If you look at professorships in the different fields, as it is on this slide, we can say that in every field we are a little bit above. So even without the quota, we have done a little bit better than the field. But also we need to say, especially when it comes to panels, evaluation panels, of course, the recruiting field is not only Switzerland, but it's an international market or an international recruitment pool. And there are countries in Europe and in the world that do much better than Switzerland. So we also have the possibility to raise our numbers when we recruit outside of Switzerland. Yes, that's what I just said. If you compare Switzerland and Europe, we are not doing very well. You see many countries that do better regarding the share of female professors at their universities. What we also kind of had an influence in this discussion and debate is that we already had introduced a quota of at least 30% women in 2015 in our foundation council. And what you can see here is the impact of this quota. So after 2015, the percentage of women raised up to almost 50% at the moment. So there you can really see the impact of a quota introduced. So the idea of introducing a quota for our research council and panels came up within the planning of the current period. So as you know, we always do strategic planning for 4 years. We are now in the period 21 to 24. And we then decided that in this period, we wanted to put a focus on promoting diversity in research. We already have measures in place, we already do things, but we decided that there needed to be even more action and again, a clear focus and some impactful measures. And within this planning and in this current multi-year plan, we decided to introduce quotas. Why? So what was our reasoning behind? I need to say that we then also worked a lot with the paper mentioned in the introduction written by Gerlinde Wallon at EMBO. So we don't only do evaluation, but the Research Council also takes political decisions. So we think it's just a question of fairness and of justice to distribute this decisional power between women and men equally. We also think that to be in the Research Council gives the researcher quite a lot of visibility in Switzerland. It's an important task to take on, and that is why we also think it's a good measure to increase visibility of female researchers in Switzerland. And then we think that diversity in panels and a good gender balance in panel improve the governance of a group when it works together. So that is also one measure to improve the quality of our panels, improve the work. We don't think that it has a direct impact on the number of female projects or projects of female researchers that will be financed. We don't see there a very clear-cut connection, but we think it's a one measure to improve the quality of the governance. And we also, as I already mentioned, we want to lead by example, and we want to bring on the discussion and set an example for other stakeholders. So that's why the quota was introduced in January 2021. So what kind of quota did we introduce? It's a very general word, and you can fill it with different numbers. One motto, or the most important motto, was be ambitious. So we as I said, we already are a little better than the Swiss landscape, but we also want to be better than the Swiss landscape. We don't want to just reflect the Swiss landscape. So that's why for the presiding board and the research council, we introduced a 40-20-40% quota, meaning 40% at least women, 40% at least men, and 20% of flexibility for men, women, and also other genders. For the panels, we didn't introduce such a strict quota. We introduced a field-adapted quota. So what does this formula mean? It means that we, in a panel, when we calculate the quota like this, we take the field representation, meaning the number of professor or percentage of female professors in Switzerland in the corresponding field, and we add a 20%. I give you an example. If in a certain field there is 8% of female professors in Switzerland, we want to reach a quota of 28%. Okay, so let me tell you how this story went and how we were successful in introducing and deciding for such a quota. And what discussions did we have in the way? Because of course it was a longer process, and we talked with a lot of people and included a lot of stakeholders. So what was clear, or what was a discussion point, is what I just said. Should we be ambitious and have a quite a strict and ambitious quota, or should we actually be already happy with what we have, that we are already quite good compared to the field? We also had two options then discussed, the strong option and the moderate option. The presiding board decided to introduce the strong option. We also talked a lot about having the same or different quotas for the National Research Council or for panels. We decided to make a difference because, as I said, a seat in the National Research Council also comes with decisional political power and with visibility. For panels, it's actually a lot of evaluation work and not so much power and visibility. That's why we didn't introduce the same kind of quota. And also because the panels are very field specific sometimes, and for fields where there are really a low share of female professors, it can be very hard to fulfill a strong quota. We also discussed a lot about the problem of probably increased and unproportional workload for women when introducing quota. So if you need more women, and all universities and other research bodies or panels are looking for women because they have the similar concerns as we do, and there are not so many women in the field, of course, it comes to somehow an unproportional workload for women. And that's also a reason why we wanted to be ambitious, but not exaggerate, and also put an effort on recruiting, especially for panels, also in other countries and not only in Switzerland, which of course we are already doing, but we can have now a concrete look into countries where the share of women is higher. And we discussed relief measures. Should we pay women more for their work because of their additional workload, so they can, for example, work by themselves free from admin tasks or from teaching, and because we of course don't want to hinder women to do research because they have to be on our panels. That was a very vivid discussion we had. I will tell you the result later. One discussion was also that we could be more inclusive towards researchers and at an earlier career stage in order to have a bigger pool to recruit. And we talked about wording. Should we call that our quota, a women's quota, a gender balancing quota, or even a male quota, which was an idea brought up that we could say we want a maximum of men of 60% instead of saying we want a minimum of women of 40%. That was also a possibility. We then decided to give it a neutral wording and call it gender quota. And the time frame, of course, we need to give our colleagues time in order to recruit women. We also don't want to we want to give the male members of our panels, to give them the chance or the possibility to end their turn. We don't want to throw them out. That would be very rude. So we put ourselves the goal to have implemented fully the quota by the end of 2026. So we really have time and can wait for free seats in order to select women. And one discussion that I expected, but was not very strong actually, is that the argument that women don't want to be quota women, that it can be bad for the visibility or for the standing of women to have been elected because of a quota. It was interesting to see that this concern was not actually strong, or was not formulated a lot. And when it was formulated, there were young women in the Research Council, for example, when we had those discussions, who defended themselves and said, we don't mind being a quota woman. If we need quota to get women in power, let's do it. So we don't have a problem with that. So I found that quite interesting, and I think maybe it was just occasional, anecdotal, but maybe also something has changed in the discourse in the meantime. So what we also did, we are still doing, because we just had the decision, we are now trying to really support the implementation, because we know that it's not easy for our colleagues to recruit women and to really implement this goal until 2026. So what we did in the process before the decision is really to have a dialogue and an exchange with all the concerned bodies. So we went to all divisions of the National Research Council and had a presentation of our ideas, received concerns, discussed concerns, integrated some of the concerns. And I think this really helped in the end to have an ambience where the resistance was really not a problem. So the decision in the presiding board was very clear, and we had these results of all these discussions and the good ambience and the good support to introduce the quota. We also are now working on an IT application. I will show it to you later. This IT application helps our colleagues to see if the panel they are in charge for or they're responsible for, if there is a need for action, or if they can relax because they have already enough women. We also are preparing a fact sheet on best practices in recruiting procedures. So how can our colleagues in the divisions really from the beginning think about the gender aspect, and from the very beginning implement measures within the procedures in order to make it easier and not to end up with a list in the end of candidates with only male or only one female candidate. The relief payment idea was discussed, but it was rejected in the end. We will not pay relief payments. We are still discussing other measures to support female panel members, as for example, additional admin support, or if we could ask them to review less applications. But this is quite controversial, and it's still an ongoing discussion. We have not decided that. So that's just a draft version, but I wanted to show it to you because we are very happy, and especially our data team who did this is very happy on this tool, and I think it will be useful. So here you can see our colleagues from the divisions can choose their panel in category, in their division, their field first in category, and then the panel, and the tool will calculate the current quota and will tell them if there is need for action. In this panel, in economic science, for example, there is an urgent need for action as they only have a 16% of female members. And this quota, where they should the quota where they should reach is in this case around 40%, and this quota is based on the field representation. So the tool also does the calculation of the field adapted quota for them. So I was asked to give recommendations. I limited my recommendations to this quota question. So with the whole experience we had and the discussion we have had and the exchange with male, but also female scientists in panels and in the research council, we came to the conclusion that it's a good idea to introduce quota, and it's a good idea to be ambitious. I also had the experience that the top-down support was very helpful. So our executive management board, but also our president, they were all very in favor of introducing quota and introducing strong measures, and like in the idea of advancing quicker in the question of gender equality. And of course, this helped a lot. But it was very important to involve stakeholders at an early stage of the process. So stakeholders from colleagues who in their daily business have to then recruit women for the panels, but also really the research council to get in touch, to have the discussions, to address the concerns. That helps. And that this, of course, needs time to take really the time and maybe have a longer process in order to have the time to discuss and to properly address concerns. And of course, we also provided a lot of arguments, data, and scientific literature. You need to have arguments why it's a good idea, what kind of quota model could work for our context. And we all think that it's good to not just have a policy decision and then leave everybody alone, but really to support the whole implementation process. So that's all from my part. I'm happy to receive your questions, and I will stop the presentation if I manage.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simona Isler, for this recommendation and very concrete measure. I have a question. 23.3% of female professors in Switzerland, 36.6% in Belgium, 54.3% in Romania. What are these two countries doing better as Switzerland in terms of gender equality? Do you know that?
Well, I don't know.
Quotas?
I'm not sure. There might be quotas somewhere, but I don't think that's the reason. We can even observe that some countries with no gender equality measures at all have good gender equality numbers, especially like countries in Eastern Europe. So we can only I'm not sure what's the reason, but one reason might be the Eastern European heritage, that they have just another tradition of women in science than in Western Europe, and from the communist experience. And also it might be a reason that, and there we need to be careful, that a research career or a professorship in some poorer countries is not combined with such great status than in other countries. So it might mean less. That can also be a reason. But that's one point I wanted to mention. But of course, there are a lot of countries doing much better in one very important question, which is really the childcare or care question in general. We really have very, very bad conditions in Switzerland for research with childcare responsibilities, and especially for mothers. And I know there are studies on that, and also there's a lot of sometimes I'm always told when I'm in contact with female scientists, international scientists especially, that they are shocked when they come to Switzerland, and they come without the family network. So they come without, we have our grandparents who help us out, which is a very important institution in Switzerland for childcare. They are on themselves and cannot rely on a good infrastructure. And that's really a problem. And I know that from scientists that they have decided not to come to Switzerland because of this. So
this could be a great problem in Switzerland.
2 points. I'm sure it's not all of the answer, but some hints. Yeah.
And a question: how do you meet comments about quota, like the women are only here because of the quota, not because of their merit?
I mean,
very usual
really,
comment.
Yeah, it's a usual comment, but I really don't understand this argument, because if we start from the idea that women are equally well qualified and equally good scientists as men, and we end up with the result of more men in professorship and more men in panels, we come to the conclusion that like there is no neutral situation. The situation where men are elected for panels and for professorships in a much higher number, there must be some kind of an informal male quota. If not, why would this be? If we are equally well qualified, the result should be equal. And as long as the result is not equal, something happens that favors men. So I would tell, how do you know that you were not elected into your professorship because of your gender? So how can men be so sure that they don't have an advantage because of their gender? And I think we just correcting a situation favoring men and introducing a more just and equal situation.
Dr. Isler, in your concrete measures, you want to increase the visibility of female researchers in Switzerland. How do you want to do it? What kind of measure? I
mean, we have other measures, as we have the Madiheim-Vögtlin Prize, for example, which is also a visibility measure. We also have the Prima Leadership Program with visibility measures. But in this concrete case, we just think that to be a member of the National Research Council comes with prestige and comes with visibility. So that's also why we are stricter with the quota in the Research Council than in just evaluation panels, because to be a member of an evaluation panel does not come necessary with power and prestige, but with a lot of work. But to be a member of the National Research Council gives you a standing in the research environment. And I think we should be very strict, or we think we should be quite strict there.
Another question, are there any scientific sources that support the idea that gender balanced boards improve their way of functioning?
Yes, there are. I mean, there is research on diversity from different contexts, also private corporate context, that mixed groups have a better governance. As I said, I would not go so far and make a direct connection like more women, more female project funded. I don't think there is such a clear or direct connection. But when it comes to governance, I mean, how decisions are taken, how discussions are structured, is everybody listened to, how the meeting is led. Those kind of questions, diversity helps, and diversity needs to be high enough. It's not enough to have 1 or 2 women on a panel, because it's very, very difficult for them as outsiders and being alone to change a discussion dynamic. There needs to be a critical mass of a minority group in order to not be a minority anymore, but to have a voice and to really being able to change discussion dynamics, for example.
And perhaps the last question, have you explored the hypothesis that women may not want a career? This is the famous gender paradox. The gender gap tends to increase as countries become more gender equal, because simply the women have the choice.
Yes, of course. And I understand every woman who says, no, thank you, I don't want to enter this game. I'm one of them. I left science for several reasons.
You were.
Yes. So, and there are good and interesting jobs outside. And that's why I think it's because we need the women, because it's, of course, it's a question of justice, but we need the women in science because we need their perspectives, and we need their different backgrounds with different experiences. We need them to design research questions in order to address important societal questions. That's not a task only men can do on themselves. That's just impossible. If we want to have science and science results that serve the whole society, we need women in science. So it's our task to make science attractive for women, and not to convince them to be part of a game which is not funny to play, or which is no pleasure to play. We need to change the rules and to change the the culture in order to make science attractive for women, because we need the women. They don't need us so much, because there are other interesting things you can do with impact.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Simona Eiser, for this very interesting presentation. You stay with us because it's time to listen to Dr. Gerling Wallon. She's Deputy Director of the European Molecular Biology Organization, and she co-authored a report on the use of quotas in academia, and she's very, very often invited to discuss these issues at a round table. The floor is yours, Dr. Wallon.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and let me just share my screen. Is it okay? Can you see this correctly?
Yeah, it's all right. Thank you.
And also very nice talk, Simona. It was great also to hear how some suggestions get implemented, and I really liked the talk. So I will be giving a bit of a background to the topic. So the reason why we are talking about this, as Simona has also shown us, is that there are few women in the top echelons of an academic career. So I'll show you some facts about that. And then of course the question is, what can be done about this? And the topic of this talks here is quota. So our quota way out. So let me give you some facts. So this is adapted from the She Figures 2015. And you can see, also similar as what Simona has shown, in Europe, over all universities, women enter more than half of the students are female. And then when you go up to the full professorial level, it goes down to 20%. You can see here represented 2 years, so you can see that the percentage is slowly creeping up. And if you were to linearly extrapolate that, you would find that in 40 to 50 years from now, we would have equality. That is the optimistic view, meaning that everything is chances for women and men are equal. And the pessimistic view actually is that this is not going to take place exactly because conditions for men and women are not equal. So when can we expect equal representations at the highest level? So this was a question that was also posed by a group around Robin Marschke at Colorado State University in Boulder. And they wanted to extrapolate the faculty composition at their university. So when they looked at the relevant literature, they found out that change in occupational segregation is moving at a glacial speed, and that's glacial speed before climate change. And so in order to be able to calculate that, you'd have to know a number of demographic constraints. So first of all, the faculty age structure. So as soon as you hire somebody at the age of around 40, they're going to be with you for the next 20 to 30 years. Then you would also know the gender composition among PhD earners, because you cannot hire who's not qualified. Then you would have to know faculty attrition and retention. It may be that some gender, in their case, they found out that women left the university at higher rates, even tenured women left the university at higher rates than tenured men. And of course, you would also have to take into account a number of new faculty positions. So they started their calculations. They had 20% female faculty, they had 40% female PhDs, and they counted, and then they extrapolated with a 40% female hiring rate per year. And so when they did this over 100 years, they found that around 30 odd years, they would have 34% female scientists at steady state. And only 34% because I said before the attrition rate for female professors was higher. So the question is, what can, then they were asking themselves, okay, so if we now play with numbers, we put in quotas, what will happen? What can we expect? So first of all, they said, okay, we will see to it that women and men leave at the same rate, or better, we make the climate for women better at our university. And of course, then after some 30 odd years, you get the 40% that you put in. Again, maybe not satisfactory. And if you then would say, we want to get to 50% and you put in a quota, 50%, you will find that, after some 40 odd years, you will have 50% women faculty. And just for completeness sake, they also said what happens if we only hire female faculty from now on. And there you would see that after 11 years, actually you would reach your goal of 50%. And then, of course, things would run its course. So from this experiment, we can learn two things. So first of all, laissez-faire will not bring the progress that we are hoping to see. And we can see that quota are good means to change the numbers, but in themselves, they may not be sufficient. So let me give you two examples why they are not sufficient and where quota will not really help. So first of all, there's self-selection and self-discrimination. So let me give you an example of some work that we have done a couple of years ago. So we have investigated why why women had lower success rates when they were applying for the EMBO postdoctoral fellowship program and the EMBO Young Investigator program. And so we had suspected that maybe there was bias in the committee, et cetera, et cetera. I can tell you later what the detailed outcome was, if you could read it up yourselves. But one main thing that we found is that women put their careers behind that of their partners. That is, women were following their partners to wherever they did their postdocs. Women were, of course, having all the, they were, of course, having all the breaks for childcare. And they were also working fewer hours than their partners, etc. So they were really self-discriminating and putting their careers in second place. And then there's a different kind of bias, that is selection bias. You may be familiar with that paper. It's just stands in for many other things, but it's very significant, very shocking, I find, when I read this. So this is from a group around Joe Handelsman. What they did was that they drafted a mock application for a lab manager position. And they sent it to faculty at research-intense universities in the United States, physics, chemistry, and biology mainly, to male and female faculty, and asked these faculty to evaluate the competence, the hireability, and the mentoring that they would give to this person and how much they would pay them. And half of these applications they sent in with a male name, John, and the other half with a female name, Jennifer. And what came back was quite shocking. So John was deemed as more competent, more hireable, and he would receive more mentoring. And also they would give him $4,000 more. So, this is only in the name. It was the same application. It was John or Jennifer, whatever the scientist, the faculty member thought they were looking at. So we believe as scientists, we are trained to be objective. So apparently we are not. So how can this be addressed? Are quota the solution? So of course, in academia, there are reasons for concern. So the main reason is the fear that quotas would undermine the merit system. So in other words, scientists who are not meritorious, i.e. are not as good as some of their competitors, would get selected. As a consequence, by objective measures, more qualified person would be left behind, with all the consequences for the overall progress of science. This is, of course, based on the assumption that selections by scientists are objective, and that's a premise that can be challenged. For example, it's challenged in this paper, for example, by Marieke van den Brink and Yvonne Benschop. They investigated the recruitment of faculty in Dutch universities, and they found that the concept of merit or excellence was quite mushy, and not everybody had a good idea of what it would mean. I know it when I see it. It was a lot of the quotes they received, and it was very strongly gendered. So now let's think about where quotas have been tried. So the quotas have been tried in political representation and in business. So political representation, oftentimes in some parties set their own quota. There are countries where actually there are election quotas, where 50% of those people who are up for vote must be women. And of course, we probably all remember quota in the business sector, where Norway started as the first country to demand 40% of board members to be female. So one concern about quota is that they would diminish quality of whatever bodies, representative bodies, are being furnished with men and women now under the quota rule. And here just a couple of papers of who show actually that quota are not diminishing quality. And in the interest of time, I will not summarize this, but if you have questions about this, I'm happy to talk to you about it. So in 2015, we at EMBO actually decided to look at quotas and their possible use in academia. So we invited a group of over 20 people, or actually 20 scientists who were either from funding agencies or from who were actually studying recruitment, gender equality. We invited a few life scientists, and we were discussing with them about quota. And we specifically analyzed quotas in 3 areas. There would be quotas for hiring at the highest career levels, so that's on the professorial level. We looked at quotas for the composition of evaluation committees, and that's what Simona told us about. And we also looked at quotas for equal demand for equal success rates for research funding. So for number 1, for the hiring at the highest career levels, we looked in particular at the cascading model. So this is a model that hasn't been invented, but very much propagated by the DFG. And actually has been made a law in the German state of North Rhine-Westphalia. And it means that you actually look at the percentage of the recruitment base to set your the quota for hiring. For example, if you want to hire somebody as a full, if you want to hire on the full professorial level, you look at assistant professor or junior professors, the percentage of men or women in there, and that would then be the quota from which you can, which tells you what percentage of female hirings you would have to do on the full professorial level. We can already think of a few problems that this might happen. I think that could be part of the discussion later. Then, for composition of the evaluation committees. So you were asking about the effect on the selection of women. That is indeed unclear. There are contradictory results in terms of, it's better, more women get selected, the more women are on the committee. Some say, some studies don't show that effect at all, and probably it shouldn't be the effect in any case. One question, but, as Simona pointed out, it is a question of representation of minorities, that should no longer be minorities on committees. So one question is about what is the critical mass, and for a minority not to feel a minority, there's the 30% number out there, but again, there's also no hard data. But most of what we've seen is really the minimum is 30% representation on evaluation committees. And then the last one, equal success rates for research funding. That is, has as a consequence that the applicant pool would be fairly reflected and full inclusion is ensured. But again, it comes back to that the academic community sees it as the possibility that less qualified applicants may get funded. But honestly, I do not believe that this would be the case, in particular at the low funding rates that we have currently. So let me just conclude. Well, quotas can make change happen fast, more or less, as we've seen. But there's, of course, this stigma for individuals who are hired or selected through a quota process. But I see that, at least Simona quoted that that in particular younger women were not worried about this. If this is a price to pay, they were willing to pay that price. The second is the academic community is not convinced, where merit and autonomy have essential values, sanctions and incentives could be seen as compromising either, and therefore corrupting the system. And thirdly, quota do not address all issues affecting gender bias. For example, the precipitous drop of women after postdoc, that is, women do not actually apply for professorial positions, that is not directly, at least not directly affected by quotas. And also, women do not choose the more technical subjects. So in particular, we would have problems recruiting women professors in physics and math and chemistry, where the representation is much lower than, for example, in the life sciences. Okay, so first of all, just to say, EMBO does use quota. So we use it for the composition of committees. So our committees have at least 30% women on them. And we are also setting a lower limit for female speakers at EMBO-funded courses and workshops. We have 30% female speakers as a minimum, and actually on average, we are about 38, 39%. So I think we could even jack that one up. Okay, and that's all for now, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vallon. Very interesting presentation too. Quotas are very often used in politics, economic. Why not at the university? Why it seems so difficult in the academic community? Or the resistance? Why?
Yeah. I mean, that has to, I think I at least try to explain that. That has to do, of course, that scientists believe that they are that science is a merit system, and that is only people who are meritorious should gain access to the system. And the problem there is that scientists also believe that they can judge merit when they see it. But as we have seen, first with the Jo Handelsman study, but also with what Marieke van den Brink has shown, is that this is a totally gendered concept. So merit is not judged fairly normally by scientists. So hence, the big worry about quota compromising that system is not justified in my view.
Mm-hmm. And is it that women don't dare to ask for quotas, a dirty word, as said Didier Picard, for fear of being chosen for the wrong reason?
Yes. I hear that a lot, in particular also from more senior women. But I've also heard from more senior women that they say, I'm being looked at as the quota woman, even though there were no quota in place when I was hired, right? So it really doesn't matter. So I think it doesn't matter whether you've been selected with a quota or not. You may be suspected to be a quota woman, right? So just better own up to it and just get the benefits of quota and not just chucking it out because of fear of stigma.
Mm-hmm. A bit provocative question, said this follower. Are quotas necessary only at the Swiss National Science Foundation? Perhaps it's a question for you, Simona Isler. Do we need quotas among plumbers or black lawyers where there are 95% men?
I would be very interested also in Gerlin's view on this question. Well, I think there are other fields or other professions where quotas could be a good measure, but I also think that we need to, that science is actually very central to the gender question because it's where knowledge is produced. So it's not any job, it's really at the heart of the knowledge society then builds on, any policy, politics, whatever. So I would not equalize science to any other field, but without saying that there might be arguments for other fields only to have also to have gender balance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, actually, so one might want to rephrase that question also about there are areas, scientific areas, maybe not in Switzerland, but in other countries where there is a higher percentage of females. In particular, when you then go to the lower levels, and if then there are no quota for men, I think that would be just as unfair, right? So I would think there should be quota also there, just to make it equal represented. And one way actually to get more men to go into specific, women's job has been shown in Denmark for kindergarten teachers. They have just upped the requirements for education and upped the salary that these people receive. And now they have a quite good representation of male kindergarten teachers.
Simona Isler spoke about the problem number one, childcare in Switzerland and everywhere, but in Switzerland especially. Dr. Warner, how did you solve this problem in your organization? How is it organized?
No, so I'm not there is the EMBL, that is a laboratory. So the EMBL actually has a crash. So I used to be a postdoc at the EMBL, and I had my children during that time. And that was the only way that I, living in Germany, a similar situation as in Switzerland at that time. That was the only way that I was able to continue working. So there is a crash there. What we do as EMBO for, the scientists whom we award, first for the fellowships, we give them extra money so that they can pay actually for their crash. And for courses and workshops, for example, we give money, we give childcare grants so that children who attend our, scientists with children who attend our conferences can actually get money from us to, hire a nanny, bring their child, get the grandmother in to take care of the child, whatever. So we no questions asked. We help them to take care of the children while they are at the conference. Mm-hmm. So that's how we try.
Another question, fantastic talk. Thank you to both speakers. Quotas can also be used to increase the representation of other groups as well, but how can we avoid that a single person can fulfill several quotas, female, P, O, C, etc.?
Oh yeah, so basically trying to get around so you have the one black token, the black
female
lesbian, so you have all EDI. I don't know if that is a big problem, and we should be really worried about it.
Simona Isler, back to this question of childcare. The Swiss Foundation will make some recommendations in these issues, or it's not your?
What we can do is two things. One is, and we do already that, we also support scientists with children, mothers or fathers, to pay their childcare because it's expensive in Switzerland. That's the so-called flexibility grant. So you can apply for it if you are in a dual career situation, and you will get money for external childcare, or you can also get money for a support person to support you in your lab. So a scientific support person, and you can lower your work time percentage for a certain time if you need that. So that's a measure we do. And then, of course, it's something we address in discussions that are maybe more political. We tell universities it's actually not our job to pay for childcare. It could be yours, or even better, it's a social security state question. But of course, it's very difficult because we are quite far away from those discussions. But when there is the chance, we say it, that we really have a problem in Switzerland, and we need to be competitive also internationally. We need to be attractive for women, for scientists with children, and it's very hard to keep on track if we don't improve in this situation. Mm-hmm. In this regard.
A question for both. Are there countries which impose quota for all academic institutions? Do you know that?
Well, I know there are laws both in Finland and also in Spain, for example, that do impose that there is this Finnish equality law, and also in Spain they have these laws, and how much they are actually changing things. I do not remember, because there are ways around that. So yes, there are countries that have laws, but how they are then being implemented is the next question.
I know that France has a new very strong law regarding gender equality for all public bodies, so also universities, but I'm not sure if quota is part of it, but quite strong gender equality measures that need to be addressed by any public body, so including universities.
Yeah.
Strong scientific evidence shows that the choice of a job, especially in the STEAM, is not linked to the environment. Why is this fact never addressed in this talk, in the talk of today?
Can you rephrase what is not being addressed? That
I don't
choice of scientific.
I repeat the question. I don't really understand. A strong scientific evidence shows that the choice of a job is not linked to the environment, probably not to the general condition. It's a personal choice. Do you understand this question?
No.
No. Okay.
Or if not, if it's really meant that it's, I mean, what?
It's not
the working conditions, for example,
yeah.
Or well, then I would like to see this strong scientific evidence. I have a hard time imagining
perhaps
that.
This follower can follow you this evidence. Let's speak about the perhaps for you, Professor Isler. In the concrete measure, you've spoken about recruiting procedures to change. What do you mean in how to change?
Well, the fact sheet is not finished yet, so I can only give you an idea in what direction we are thinking. But for example, that really from the very beginning, it starts when you formulate what you are looking for. So how do you formulate? How do you also formulate in a way that attracts women for the job, for example? There is evidence on that, or there is experience on that. And then looking in a very active way for women. So not just waiting and okay, no woman applied, but really addressing women explicitly. And then when you do a short list, or when you compare profiles, to do it in a very, very systematic way, and to always control for gender bias, or in the process of recruiting for panels, but also universities have a lot of experience in improving those processes. We think you can already do a lot when you start at the very beginning, and not in the end, we only have a woman who is not a very strong candidate, so we can't do anything about it. We need to select the man.
I come back to the question about the strong scientific evidence. It was meant about the equality paradox, the gender paradox. The gender gap tends to increase as countries become more gender equal. Perhaps to Professor Wallon, what do you think about that? It's not you understand the question now? It means it's a question of choice, not of general condition. In a more gender equal country, this is the gender paradox, women are less represented in the leading position in science.
Well, I don't know whether
science.
I don't know whether that is true, but that's, I think, what I meant with self-discrimination, that women are less, they think they have all the other stuff to do in the household with the children, etc., which comes on top of a challenging position in the sciences, and that they think twice whether they would put that upon themselves, plus, all the childcare business, etc. And I think as long as this is not equal, those demands on people's time are not equal between men and women, and they are not, I can show you data on that, things are not going to change. I mean, really, who's so stupid as to, a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of women are stupid enough to do it, but, as long as these things are not equal, things are not going to change. Why would you, it's an extra activation barrier to speak about it in scientific terms, right?
Yes, and I would also like to stress again, I agree, it's many women take a well-informed choice, but it's not it's about society, and it's about it's not good for society to have a research landscape or a scientific landscape without female perspectives and questions in it. We produce dangerous research gaps and knowledge gaps, and that's not acceptable. So we need to think about under which condition those women would take another choice, and then change the conditions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the sentence, conclusion sentences. Dr. Simona Isler, Gerling Wallon, very interesting discussion. We have come to the end of this webinar. Thank you to our audience too for your interest. You can watch again this webinar on YouTube, and in the next webinar in a week, November 1, we will invite you to an open criticism of the concept of excellence. See you in a week. Thank you very much.